All right. Hey guys, this is Alex. Now that we're all cooped up, I figured I'd try something a little bit different and make a little tutorial, sort of like a making of one of the songs on my upcoming record. I picked Coyote for this. This is one of my favorite things I've made. I know it came out about a year ago, but I was super proud of it, and it kind of set the tone for what the album ahead is going to be. So really excited to dive through this. I want to shout out Scott Bruzenak was my co-producer on this and a bit of a mentor for me throughout this crazy, chaotic experience that was Coyote. I had Miles Walker mix the track for me, Tyler Demorest playing drums, Gabe Wheaton on violin, and Nick Daley laying down some trombone. So please enjoy my first little making of Coyote. All right, here we go. This is the project file for Coyote. What you didn't get to see was that I just recorded a whole thing and then realized it wasn't set up right. So this is take two. Let's just dive in. This track was a pretty interesting one for me. I started it very differently than I've ever started a song. You know, most of the times I find that if you go with your vocal first, I end up with a stronger song. And if you go track first, I end up with a stronger track. And I've never been able to configure it any other way. But with this one, I was like, let's not even think about the vocal. Let's just kind of go buck wild for a bit on the instrumental, and then I'll figure something out later. And I think the result is, it's exactly what I was going for, but it's, the song is more, the vocal, I should say, is more like an accompaniment rather than the feature of this one. And honestly, the first couple bars you hear is exactly how it started. I grabbed, Gabe came over and played violin, and laid down this arpeggio. This was super easy for him, but here was Gabe. Gabe sounds great. Gabe always sounds great. And what I heard on top of that was, I always forget the name of this, but it's kind of like a hemiola or a polyrhythm or like rhythmic displacement, but it's not really technically any of those things, I guess. But it's kind of like a repeating rhythmic figure that happens in its own space of time, maybe not related to like the typical meter. So sorry, this is a terrible explanation, but I recorded my little ukulele here. Sent it down an octave and then had a little pedal tone playing with it. So I just heard this. It's not like I thought about it, but it ended up being a figure that repeats every bar. And what do we got here? 2.5 beats, which is goofy. I mean, it doesn't really make sense if you think to write something like that, but it... Yeah, so every time you see a chop is like technically when the cycle repeats. And it sounds awful by itself, but I really did enjoy the way it synced up with Gabe here. Yeah, you get the idea. I think I've got, kalimbas and stuff. Yeah, just getting the groove going. I tell you what, man, this section destroyed me. It was like 2 full days of editing, not because Gabe's playing wasn't great or none of this stuff. It's not that complicated, but it ended up being this thing where it just, if it was slightly swung rhythmically, it felt cooler than if it was just straight quantized. And because this pattern repeats like this, I kind of had to chop every single 16th note, every little transient on all 3 of these parts and line them up just right. And I couldn't really do it visually for some reason. It was only one of those things that locked when it sounded right. And the wacky part about rhythm is that when you move something, it sort of has its own little rhythmic context where it'll affect how the transient before and the transient after sounds. And a lot of times that's not too big of a deal, but for some reason with this part, it was like every time I'd solve a transient, it would make the next one sounded late by comparison, it drove me absolutely crazy. And when it was locked, you could feel it, and when it wasn't, it just sounded wacky. It sounded too complicated. But I'm really glad I stuck with it, because this kind of trio is what drives the whole song, and it's some of my favorite stuff in here. Like as the verse unfolds, we have it cooking with the drums, and I really like that way that felt. Yeah, the drums for this, I very specifically wanted to go sample-based. I should rewind a little bit and say that one of the reasons I don't do this is my first tutorial thingy, but I don't really I'm not like a very cool, producer tricks kind of person. I just love recording live stuff and getting as much organic stuff onto the page, and then kind of processing it and gluing everything together in a more contemporary, like, pop way. And so these drums, I wanted them to be very quantized, very much the same velocity, very pop, because everything that's going on above it is just so organic. And I ended up hearing, I think this was like the core of this rhythm was a splice loop that I had found, and it was kind of in that garagey UK style, and I liked it. I just liked that shuffle, so I put that underneath with kind of my own typical layering of like triangles and little jangly percussion that I always add. Yeah, I should say that I got my first analog synth during the experience of making this. So like I finally got this Prophet Rev 2, and I just fell in love with it. I mean, I was kind of learning as I went along, and Scott, my co-producer on this one, really helped me figure out how to make it work. But I love the experience of getting off the computer and working with an instrument. I love the sounds that it makes. I mean, I'm sure people could debate forever, like soft synths versus analog stuff, but I just felt like it all glued really well with the organic stuff I had going on. Okay, so that's like the first verse. I probably won't end up talking too much about this vocal, just because it's pretty typical. There's not a whole lot of tricks going on with it. I never kill. I'm not here sipping from the bottle of a Molotov cocktail. When I'm making my background layers, I like to do some slightly unconventional stuff, like take the lead, formant it down, send it wide with like a sample delay, and use that as like a... I'm not here sipping from the bottle of a Molotov cocktail. I'm not here sipping from the bottle of a Molotov cocktail. I mean, it just gives it some texture, like a normal background double would, but when it's formatted, I just feel like it's slightly more otherworldly, which in the context of a song like this was what I was going for. Yeah, so that's that spot. Moving on. Oh, now that I see this, I should mention I got super in my head about each section sounding too slow, but I couldn't push the whole track up, so the resulting map is this crazy thing where like I'm alternating in a distance of only 2 BPM from like section to section. Nothing, I mean, the idea is you're not supposed to notice it, but just every section just felt the right kind of speed in its own thing. I have no idea if that was worth doing and if it made any difference, but I was like a year and a half deep on this song, so I was not rational about any of it. Anyway, yeah, first little drop spot. Well, that was a lot of noise. What happened there? What in the world, did we just unmute something? Somehow the master unmuted. Yeah, okay, so that spot's super basic. I wanted to keep it really sparse kind of focus on the vocal there for just a second, and then gradually add to the chaos, which I will solo for you. So we started with all our pluck stuff. Drums coming in. For some reason, I felt like, okay, this is not dense enough. We need to add more layers to it. And I heard this little kalimba line. Let me turn this up. Similar to that opening, this was like a real hack job of editing just to get it to swing right. Play solo. Yeah, so obviously it sounds pretty crazy. But in context, it's working. So I kind of went by ear with a lot of that stuff. But yeah, it took forever. Guitars, these are my classic Alex can't play guitar tenths. I just love this instrument, but I can't play it as hard as I try. So I write these awful little tenths where it's just like the root and the tenth, and I you know, I don't know what to tell you. Like it communicates what I need emotionally, but it's not what a guitarist would generally do or be excited by. Some little twinkles in there. That's like very much the core motor of this section. And then I did actually get pretty crazy with the vocals here. So every time I'm trying some sound designy shit, I like open up a new project file, and I ended up taking the lead vocal here and running it through this plugin called Portal by Output, and just basically like making chaos and then sculpting it to be somewhat musical. Let me play this thing for you. Yeah, you get the idea. So it's like a lot of reverse stuff. Portal just crazy. I don't even understand what it does exactly, but it runs your thing through some sort of psychotic machine. And you know, you grab your favorite bits, pan it around, reverb, just kind of like making it work in the context of what you need from there. Okay, yeah, this spot is kind of interesting, I guess. So when I was at this section, I wanted it to be, this is like a pretty dramatic piece. It's definitely like going for it. And I wanted something sort of big and orchestral and tragic for this section. And I played a piece in college by a composer named Anton Bruckner, and it was his 7th Symphony. This is a long piece. Like every movement is like a half hour or something, but there's this one spot in the second movement that he just starts like hammering on these really tragic chords, just hitting you with it in the face. And I heard that here and might have ended up borrowing a bit of it, sort of chopping it into place. Yeah, so all together. Last thing I should say about this section. Scott helped me kind of configure this profit bass to kind of sit underneath and then open up the filter at choice moments. Sort of a basic sawtooth thing, but and you don't really notice it, but it really does make a difference when I'm kind of pointing a direction at like, boom, here's a big impact moment, and then hide away, and then come back again. Yeah, so that's my drop. I don't recommend ever putting that many layers in a thing because it takes a while to make sense of, but I like that sort of dense orchestral sound at times, and I felt like that spot needed it. So moving on, verse 2, super basic, not really a whole lot of new shit in here. Coyote, run, 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 without the money you say, in the chamber, blood in the water, and if it kill me, it'll kill me, said it kill me, but I'm never gonna live it. I love my little like triangles and stuff. Alright, cool. So this is we're heading into the bridge. This is definitely one of my favorite spots of the song. And I knew I wanted to do something special here and unconventional for my normal records. I mean, I don't generally write too many bridges, and then within that, I don't spend this much time kind of wandering in them, but this song is so bizarre that I just felt like, all right, let's make some cool music here. I knew I wanted to go like 100% analog with it, just live instruments, and I knew I wanted to make some interesting chord choices that I don't ever generally get to write, such cool chords, because I always felt a little constricted by like pop vocal songwriting, which I think was just like a prison I created that's not real. I mean, you can do whatever you want, and this section kind of helped me discover how fun and normal it is to try something like that. So I had like this mini bridge into the bridge, so to speak, because I needed to get from what is generally like a song in E minor, or at least like kind of lands that E minor 6, B, A major. And I felt like it would be cool to sort of like modulate or land in this like major substitution of what you've been hearing the whole time. So instead of, you get sorry, can't really see my keys behind this microphone. Also, I suck at piano. But yeah, so like I needed to do a little bit of wiggling here to get there. Just kind of dancing around some chords so I can get to a cadence that takes you to E major. Yeah, okay, so like I said, I wanted to go live here. We had, sample drums everywhere else, but this was the one spot that I wrangled Tyler to come over. Actually, we went to his studio and record his drum set. It's sort of a halfway step. I didn't have the guts to go fully like drum recording, because like, man, when you start dealing with a couple mic positions, it gets pretty complicated pretty fast. So what I ended up doing was taking his playing and chopping it up as like a sample. So everything came from a live set, but I definitely edited this to kind of work. Slowly getting out of my shell. Yeah, let's see what we got. Some rides coming in, tambourines, and a little side stick. Got. I love making these kind of things. Like, they take a while because like there's a pitch for each of the sticks, but just keep layering them. Why not? I love making what you're hearing right now, but I'm really bad at processing it and sort of like gluing it all and compressing it. And I definitely leaned on Miles and Scott to kind of help slot this into place. So that's drums plus piano. It's a bit loud. One of these days, I'll get an actual piano, like an upright here for the studio. I moved to a new room, so I've got a little bit more space. But this is Keyscape. Just been living and breathing Keyscape. I did do some, I performed it rather than just kind of like penciled it in. There's a lot of flamming and a lot of humanness to it that is intentional. And then also, I don't know how much this came across, but I think I fucked with the stereo imaging so that we start quite narrow center channel mono-y here, and then as the octaves come in, I think I start to widen it a bit. And I love like all the pedal tones you can kind of put into a chord progression like this are really fun. Just these like hanging pitches. So like in the vocal, I'm doing this Phrygian thing. There's a night here that like has that night here. And then I land on this seventh. When you just have like one solitary pedal pitch like hanging on everything, it just, every chord feels a little bit different. So sort of like tremolo guitars with a bunch of reverb and amps and low passed. Oh yeah, I gotta talk about trombone. So I was so lucky to work with Nick Daley, who just laid this down super easy. Just the coolest. And then I had to go and like bury it with everything. Super sad. I don't know if this song works as an instrumental, but it would have been cool to put out as well. So I think the only other thing was like I also heard some cool riser potential in this, and I did play another piece in college by a composer named Golihov, and the piece was called Azul, and it had a movement in it that was sort of like, it was like about space. It had something to do with space. I can't quite remember, but it was like, meteor showers and stuff, and so borrowed a little bit of that. This kind of like starfall sound. Yeah, so that's the bridge. I think originally it was like twice the length of all this, and it was just such a fun section to work on because it just felt like you could kind of do anything. And honestly, like I could probably have just turned this whole thing into another song too. So maybe when we tour it, we'll get crazy there. And then headed into drop 2 is like kind of drop dynamite on everything, and just see what happens. Nothing super crazy or different from this section to like that climactic point in the first drop, but I did get a chance to track Nick here, and I thought he did some cool shit. some sort of like big band thing. I was just having him try out. I mean, he just like ad-libbed a bunch of takes, and then I kind of picked and comped my favorites, and then put a bunch of distortion on it to help it cut through. Yeah, so that is Coyote. That took however long to explain, like 20 minutes to explain, and like a year and a half to make. There was definitely a lot of moments in this process where I thought I was just losing my mind. I mean, I got lost a lot during this because it felt overwhelming, too complicated, but I was really glad to stick with it, and I was really glad to have I use my co-producer Scott in a pretty interesting way. Like, we didn't work too much together. I just kind of had to mentor me. Like, every couple months I just send it to him and be like, what's going on here? Because you lose context so fast when you're just living in something, especially if it's this dense. And he did a great job of kind of like guiding me, like, okay, this is working. I think you're taking up too much time here. And then we jam a little bit. But yeah, so this track kind of created the foundation for what the album ahead is going to sound like. Not everything is obviously this crazy. I probably only have one more song that's like this manic, but this kind of fusion of organic stuff with the sample stuff, and yeah, I really dig it. So I hope you guys enjoy. I have no idea if this was interesting or helpful, but I figured I'd give it a shot. So thanks for listening, and this was Making Coyote. All right.